Thanks for coming to class. Today, and the topic of what I'm going to talk about is really high achievers and emotional disruptions. I had to write it down, and what that means in grief. So let's talk about that because when we look at, right, high achievers like to do things a little differently. And because high achievers have so much capacity, they can stuff just an enormous amount of stuff. So when we get to that part in prosperity mindset where somebody's actually unpacking a bunch of stuff, we realize the patterns, right? And what ends up happening in prosperity mindset, especially when you get a couple years into it, is you start to notice the big. And the big is that you're so good at getting through the eruption of disruption of all the things that are happening, and you keep piling through because there's so many, especially for many of you who are in corporate America and high profile jobs, those of you who are trailblazing, when we see someone who has a really high capacity and is constantly solving every dilemma, that they just kind of get through every eruption every day. But what happens? So when you hold real still, there's still the of disruption somewhere lingering. And what that looks like is that you suddenly start to feel people who have just an unease, right? And we call it Sturm und Drang. Sturm und Drang. It's a German term, but it basically means turmoil, right? That there's this silent turmoil that's underneath. And what is left is that you just will feel it, and that you aren't used to actually processing it because the disruption is over. And so a lot of times people will just go, look, because it's not moving anymore, I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to think about it because it's not on fire. But that doesn't mean just because it's holding still or because it's laying down that you actually processed it. And everything that you have had to just get through as this eruption in your life doesn't mean that it was processed just because it's not erupting. So what happens is that many people come into prosperity mindset and they get into class and they start doing some healing work and they go, oh my gosh, I have all of this feeling of impending doom, that I have some woe, that I'm feeling hesitation, that I'm constantly kind of itching for something to happen, that I have kind of exasperation, or that I'm lamenting, that there's just this piece of annoyance that we can't track. And what we can't track is because it's all of this past clatter and vulgarity and hassle and breach that we didn't process, that we passed through it, that it's not on fire in front of you anymore. But that doesn't mean you actually went, oh, let me let that go. Because people with a high capacity make space for emotional garbage. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing. The amount of emotional garbage I can stuff in my own life, stellar. It's amazing. It's kind of gross. It's great. So what we have to recognize is that all of those complications and melodramas and all of that stuff, we actually have to process. And because it's so much, depending on how old you are, you have that much, right? So remember, let's talk to grief, right? Grief, the reason I like grief is because on the other side of grief is my favorite place. So why are we doing this, right? Because on the other side of grief is peace. The other side of grief is peace, right? And when we look at our grieving processes in all the parts of our life, right, we are looking for peace. That person is at peace because their grief and their torment and their disruption is over, right? So when we are looking at grief, there is an advantage. And because you're alive and you're looking for peace, there's some advantages here. One, for a business owner, it's profit. If you process your grief, you'll be more profitable. We have 24 years of proof on that for business owners. The second is you'll get your pushback, right? You'll be able to not be hesitant anymore. that getting through your grief, this perplexing heartbreak on every level, because that's what grief is, it's the perplexing heartbreak on every level. If we can get you through that, and the other side of that is peace, you're going to get your profit back. You're going to get your pushback, right? Because you have agency. You've opened up some space. We have talked in this and the other part of the curio cabinet of emotions, right? You get all of these things. But what you also get back, if doing lots and lots and lots of this, the more grief that you are willing to look in that curio cabinet of emotions, the more grief you are willing to process, what you'll also get back is posture. And what I mean by posture is that you'll be able to stand differently. And what ends up happening is a lot of those little aches and pains and that stuff is they start to go away because we're not holding that emotion in our body, because we don't need to have that. So the distress, the suffering, the pining, the unease, the aversion, all of our wounded feelings that we didn't actually process, as soon as you clear them out, now you can actually move your arms again. And especially on disgust, right? I am disgusted by that. As opposed to just minor bummers, right? But when we look at that unease, remember there's grief that comes from tragedy. That's like the blue funk kind of grief. That is the easiest grief to know, right? Because there's a tragedy that's attached to it. What we don't know, what we don't process are all the micro traumas, are all these smaller pieces of trauma that are disruptions, that are things that we've had to solve, that all of these daily eruptions of our life and these everyday melodramas that are kind of complicated and stormy. And we don't know what to do with that turmoil. And so we stuff it as soon as it stops storming, and we move on to the next part of our day. And by that stuffing, what ends up happening is we end up with this mild depression, we end up with hesitation, we end up with exasperation, easily there, or you start to find yourself lamenting, where you start to lament, why does it have to be this way? Do I even like this, right? And so you start to get into this blah, this malaise. So what is the outcome, right? The outcome is to get peace. Anytime when we look at high achievers, anytime that I bring up grief, they tell me they don't have much. And then we start getting into it and they're like, I guess I had something to process. And I can look right in the mirror. I can look right in the mirror and go, oh, I know what that's like. Right? Yeah, I'm good. No, I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. But we're not. So the fact of the matter is that you will want to be kinder and gentler, a little more thoughtful, and find some other tools like a journal, like, again, inviting your mind, inviting your words, inviting statements. Word prompts are great to start looking through. Wow, let me just think about the last 10 things this week that were really disruptive or really emotionally clamoring in my life. And let me look at my resistance around them. Let me look at the melodrama that played out. And then let me process that. Now, we have other videos on how to process the pieces of grief. You will be surprised at how many times we have distress every day. Most people are having some sort of distress every single day in their life because they have families, because they have coworkers, because they're leading great things into the world, that we have distress every day and because we're with people, and people are sometimes awful and sometimes they're great. But you have to still process the work that's within you. That is your journey. That is your place. Remember, our only goal, we have one goal, right? And that's to pull that archer back, right? We only have one arrow to hit, and that's a target right up there. And that target is to be well within. And to be well within, it means that we have to be able to manage all the stuff that's out here, this perplexing, weird, creepy, crazy, funky, wonderful, wild, beautiful, bright, authentic world that's out here. We have to process out here. right? We have to see this is still here. We're still part of this. But internally, peace is available 100% of the time. Peace is available to you no matter what is happening out here. And that is the very busy work you should be doing. It is the very busy work of saying, we're going to hold in for a minute and I'm going to find the peace within myself. And I'm going to take a breath and I'm going to find that peace, because peace is available no matter what is happening out here. And that part, I think we forget, and that you have to earn, you have to work at it. That's the practitioner part of prosperity, is you have to be able to get out of all of this outside junk and get inward in whatever way you can, by asking yourself another question, or finding that peace, or claiming that peace, or calling that peace, because you have to really get into the stuff that is not serving you, and that maybe those wounded feelings are still there, and working them through. It only takes a few minutes. So when I look at grief work, I remind people that this is 20 minutes. It's 20 minutes. It's 20 minutes. You can process a lot of stuff in 20 minutes. I can process 10-year-old garbage, like 10 years of being mad at somebody in 20 minutes. So use the other video on how to process grief. Again, give yourself a prompt, start looking through these pieces, but it is these everyday disruptions and these micro traumas that start adding up. And then you start adding up with somebody who suddenly is having muscle pain, or they're getting all, they're just creaky and gosh, I'm aging faster than I like. Yeah, because you're holding your emotional garbage. You don't need that. You don't need that. Okay, well, thank you again. Thank you. That you showing up for you is still the kindest, most thoughtful thing you can do. If you are in charge of many people and many things, the most important person you need to invest in is you. Because all of this stuff that's out here isn't going to stop. Learning to find peace on the other side. And the other side of peace is grief. So if you process the grief, you will get to peace. And then if you are this other part, right, what's the advantage of doing that processing work? Well, if your business is profit, you will find more profit because you actually can heal all this garbage. The other is push. You'll feel more agency. You'll be able to move forward. And the third part, which is the prosperity part, that's where your payoff is posture. You can actually feel complete, that you are in alignment. And we will actually, the more of it you do, you will physically see the difference. We had somebody the other day who was in class. She went and looked up somebody that had been working in class. And now she has put in probably 600 hours into prosperity mindset, of coming to class, of doing the one-on-ones, of whatever. She's had 5 years of work. And so this person that was in class with her went and looked up her old videos of what she looked like differently. She goes, I can't believe that was the same person. And I said, that's what the work is. That's why you have to do the work. And it was so enormously different to see that person that was carrying all their pain as a high achiever to someone who had done the emotional work, that they didn't even look like the same person. That you saw someone who was just bright and light at the end, and they're charismatic and they're delicious, and that's what you are. So if you want to get to your charisma and your mojo and get all of that back, you got to do the work. And this is today. This is the work you're doing. So I cannot thank you enough. So keep doing it. And right, remember, disruption, stuffing, right? Just because it's holding still doesn't mean you processed it. So that's the piece I'm calling you out on, right? Just because your calamities are holding still doesn't mean they're processed. Just means they're not moving. Okay. Have a great day. Bye.